Chapter 10 Strange Visitor. The stretch of bright woods ended abruptly. A large two-story house fashioned much like the southern mansions of Crispet's youth sprang out of nowhere. There was something both inviting and forbidding about the small paned windows that peered like 1,000 eyes from the white exterior. Smoke climbed lazily from what appeared to be an upstairs fireplace. Sun touched the shake roof, but the rest of the house blended into the shady veil of the background. Somewhere a pheasant crowed. "I call it home," Wilson North said with mock humility. "It's beautiful," Crispet breathed. "Do you live here all alone?" At his curt no, she regretted asking. He always makes me feel in the wrong, she thought. I'll keep my curiosity to myself. As if to forestall any further questions, Wilson pointed, "Over there's Joe's place." Straining against the shadows, Crispet's eyes picked out the outline of the cabin that Joseph Craig had pointed out on their way to the Malones that first day. Was that only 3 weeks ago? It seemed like a lifetime. The cabin was close, as settlers measured distance, but a wide stream lay between the two houses. "Graveyard Creek," Wilson explained. "Looks innocent now, but it can play havoc when Chinook woods melt the snowpack." "How do you cross those creeks?" And she remembered. "Doesn't the river run almost all the way around Turnaround Inn?" Wilson nodded. "Joe and I just fell a fir and drop it across the creek. Floods wash them away every year, which is just as well. The footlogs get mossy and slippery anyway. Once," he laughed, remembering, "the parson and his fine lady fell in the creek here." Crispet laughed with him. He continued, "My mother insisted that a board be nailed atop after that, and a wire stretched for a handhold." The slim, stout log spanning Graveyard Creek was arrow straight. It looked like it would last forever. The floods must pack a wallop. No wonder settlers dreaded the winter. Wilson had slowed the horse to a walk. As to crossing the river, mostly people ford when the water's high. Ford? He explained about wading horses across and floating the wagon bed. Well, it was becoming clear why Joe thought she would be needing boots. For some time Crispet had been conscious of a distant roar. As the cart moved into the woods again, the noise was closer. "Graveyard Falls," Wilson raised his voice as the roar became near-deafening. "About half a mile upstream. Furnishes power for the grist mill. Mine and Joe's. We supply settlers and more." How many more surprises did these two enterprising young men have in store? For goodness sake. Grist, like for flour and meal? Crispet supposed the question sounded silly and citified, and sure enough, it was the grist Wilson North needed for his humor to feed upon. "Ah, yes." He faked a sigh. "Notice how our feet turn inward? That's from tramping flour into barrels for export. And the meal?" Charlie Horse interrupted his sentence by stopping at a pole gate. They had reached a rail fence which surrounded a building of sorts. At least a rusty tin roof showed above it. "Good boy. Well?" Wilson alighted and offered his hand. "Welcome to Graveyard Shack." She accepted his hand and stepped down. He opened the gate, and Crispet stepped through, then stopped dead in her tracks, aghast at what she saw. Surely this crude lean-to could not be the cabin that Nate Goldsmith had mentioned. Why, it offered less protection than the temporary quarters occupied by miners she had seen in California. And they were men. Small wonder Joe hadn't been in a hurry to bring her to such a place. Aware that Wilson North was watching, Crispet mustered as much dignity as possible, picked up her wool skirt, and stepped through the dried thistles. The one-room shanty slanted crazily as if to meet her. Involuntarily she stepped back. "There's no window!" was all she could gasp. "No window, she says," Wilson mused. Then, as if inspired, "But oh, what a view! Creek from the front and the graveyard from the back. If it had a back door." Crispet jumped at a strange flapping noise coming from the shack. "Not to worry," Wilson soothed. "Not in daylight hours, that is. It's night when the strange visitor comes. He who?" Crispet realized that her eyes must be round with fear. She was past caring about Wilson's silly banter aimed at her. "Nobody knows for sure, even if he's white or Indian. Both, they say, are buried here. He comes to claim them." "He's poking fun at me," she reasoned, like always. The noise is coming from the piece of canvas serving as a door. Of course it had been his wild tales and her imagination, like Brom Bones and Ichabod Crane. But it was no use. She was unable to regain her composure. A wild laugh rose in her throat. Escape was all that mattered. "Miss Kelly?" There was a sudden concern in Wilson North's voice. "Crispet?" "Please, please," she pled through stiff lips. "Take me away." He touched her elbow, but she tore away and climbed frantically into the cart. Even Charlie Horse seemed strangely subdued. Like gunpowder, she thought, remembering the one-eyed nag in the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Crispeth, listen to me. Please do. When Wilson spoke, Crispeth was sure he spoke softly, but his voice had a ghostly ring in the silence of the woods. Charlie Horse picked up speed, and it was comforting to note that the cart rolled swiftly toward another clearing once his riders were aboard. The hammering of her heart was easing, but Crispeth dared not risk her voice. I'm sorry, I truly am. Wilson's voice said that he was unaccustomed to apologizing. That light touch is a cover-up, she thought. He's been hurt, like me. Fear gave way to surprise. I understand, Crispeth spoke slowly. Yes, she understood more than the graveyard incident, or thought she did, for she was beginning to understand the man and maybe herself. But she did not understand his next words. Joe and me, and the others, had to show you it's impossible for a fine lady like you to live there. I personally will see to that. He would see to that. What property did Wilson North have? But for the first time, Beth did not meet his challenge. Maybe she was the strange visitor in this new land.